Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means tags here on our little corner of BookTube, Tag Tuesday. And I today am doing a tag that is part of an ongoing series. Jim at Jim's Books and Reading and Stuff is doing one tag for every letter of the alphabet, and they've been a ton of fun. He has such a talent for off the wall and interesting and involving questions. I swear, his tags are more. These alphabet tags are more fun to watch than they are to do. But we are up to the letter H. We are at H. Several of you have, oh, by the way, have commented on this. I got a new case for an iPad. A new armored case, everything covered, slightly waterproof, but the main thing is it's heavily rubberized on the corners. So if this thing, if I drop it or if I put it, on the side of the bed and it slides down to the floor, it's not going to ding or damage or anything, and it's better for gripping. But anyway, we're on the H tag here, so we're going to do the prompts all starting with H, and this being BookTube, the first prompt is H is for Harry Potter. Would you prefer to travel to Hogwarts in flying car or the Hogwarts Express? And I have two levels of responses here. One is, of course, the usual response that I give to questions like this, which is that I don't want to be part of a fictional world. I don't want to go there. I know it's not in the spirit of fun, but nevertheless, I don't have an answer because I have no way to even make myself want to. In terms of the magic of the books, I think that Hogwarts Express is a more magical invention of J.K. Rowling. So that maybe that would get my preference just in terms of reading. But that's the first level of my response. And the second level is, of course, to point out that since J.K. Rowling has been canceled by a large number of people who were her former diehard fans, for a political opinion they disagree with, has nothing to do with the books, and that they just learned about a couple of years ago, or whatever. Since she has been canceled by those same people, by those people who have removed her books from their shelves, who never pass up an opportunity when her name comes up to vilify her, never pass up an opportunity to insert their opinion about her political beliefs at a party or a PTA gathering or whatever. This will probably be one of the last times that we see a Harry Potter-themed question in a tag, because J.K. Rowling in the reading world, at least the politically correct, censorious, quasi-fascist reading world, is persona non grata. J.K. Rowling herself, who so many of the people that banished her from their bookshelves, put her in up for sale, vilify her whenever her name comes up in any kind of conversation, even if they're not invited into that conversation, and even if her political opinions aren't part of the conversation, they bring it up anyway, just to vilify her. Those people, the same people that are doing that, were the 10-year-olds at the opening parties at their bookstore. They sorted themselves into different Hogwarts houses. They knew everything there was to know about the books, dearly loved them, and looked forward to the day when they would hand those books to their own children. And the worst of that group here in 2021 will tell you that that isn't true. And it's because they have retroactively made it true. They haven't just removed the books from their shelves because of a political opinion the author said that they disagree with. It's that they also say they never actually did love the books. They have retroactively changed their opinion of 10-year-old self so that their personal reality now does not reflect ever having liked this author, despite copious evidence to the contrary, despite a large documentary history to the contrary. It doesn't matter. I not only don't like this author for a political opinion that differs from the one that I consider to be correct, but also I never did like this author. And every time I see that, whether it's on BookTube or out in the larger world, my first thought is always, okay, well, you haven't told me much about J.K. Rowling. You haven't told me much about your response to J.K. Rowling's current year political opinion that you disagree with. But you have told me one thing, and that's not to pay attention to you when it comes to books. Not at all. Not in the slightest. If you can rewrite your personal reality going back 15 years, if you can retroactively say that because you disagree with an author's opinion in 2021, you never liked the author in 2010, even though you did, then you've got a mental illness. And if what does that say about you telling me in 2021 that you love Sally Rooney's latest piece of crap, or that you love Detransition Baby? If you say that you love those things now, well, you don't, because you can. If that can change, if you don't mean it, then why should I pay any attention to you? When if Sally Rooney in 5 years were to say, I don't know, there were parts of the South African apartheid government that seemed to work fairly well, and suddenly she is canceled. And suddenly you're taking her books off your shelf and putting them in a closet or turning them face to the wall and saying, I never actually did like those books when I was watching you say you did. If you can do that kind of crap, that kind of arch-Republican, neo-Nazi rewriting of actual witnessed history, then, okay, fine, that's a drama that you want to partake in, but it means that I don't have to listen to you when it comes to books, because nothing you say is permanent, even in the sense of the permanent historical record. But anyway, that was a long digression, wasn't it? Anyway, it was just to say that Harry Potter prompts in tags, when they're not explicitly crafted out of hatred. So H is for Harry Potter. How many hateful people do you know? Something like that might be permissible, but I don't think Harry Potter prompts in the future will turn up too often, because the author has been canceled. The next prompt, we'll get into less trouble with the next prompt. H is for horror. Why do you think kids love horror? I think kids love horror for a very simple reason, because it frightens them. And I would go since I'm in a troublemaking mood, I would go so far as to say that one of the reasons why adults love horror is because it frightened them as children. Certainly that's one of the only explanations that I have ever been able to come up with for the continued appeal of Stephen King's novels among his professed fans. Because he didn't just introduce a lot of people to reading. He also was the reading that they did. He is inextricably linked with their own personal past as readers. Millions of people fell in love with reading because of Stephen King's novels and short stories, continue to love it because of Stephen King's novels and short stories, and still love his novels and short stories, and they've branched out to love all sorts of other things. And I firmly believe that the reason that, while branching out to love other things, they haven't disowned him and said, when I was a child, I did childish things, but now that I'm a man, I put away childish things. The reason why they haven't disowned him, even though he is manifestly without any writing talent whatsoever, I think is because they loved him as children. I can't think of another reason why that would be true. So I'm going to say that kids love horror because it frightens them. Then H is for Hemingway, Hemingway or Fitzgerald. First of all, I have to smile because the wording of this prompt would have infuriated Ernest Hemingway. That his prompt in this tag is linked with not only another writer of his time, but the writer of his time that most worried him in terms of outshining his own reputation. One of the only reputations that he couldn't seriously destroy. Although he did seriously try. It's just Fitzgerald gave him very little in the way of grounds, his usual grounds, to try to destroy another person's literary career. And for me, the choice here is always going to be Fitzgerald. Because Fitzgerald has the ability to look outside of his own self in his fiction. And Hemingway absolutely does not have that ability. No matter what, that he changes the locations or the nature of the characters, are they old, are they young, are they male, are they female, are they literate, are they not literate? One way or another, all of Hemingway's art is inward. All of it is looking at him. So he's inescapable in his own fiction. And Fitzgerald is not. Largely not. I mean, there are obviously heavily autobiographical works, but there are also works that definitely aren't. I think part of that reason might be that for a large chunk of his career, far larger and far more directly than Hemingway, Fitzgerald was writing for money. And that discourages that kind of inwardness. That makes you write for an audience rather than for yourself. Maybe that's the case. So I'm thinking here mainly of Fitzgerald's short stories. But one way or another, whatever the reason is for the difference in the end product, it's Fitzgerald for me. Hemingway, I gave him a systematic reread about 10 years ago, and I sometimes think that maybe it's time for another one, but I really think he's one of those authors, I might revisit him, but I really think he's one of those authors that I now get. I now know what's there, and I know what's not there. I'm most often acquainted with what's not there by listening to Hemingway fans, who almost always talk about stuff that isn't in Hemingway. So the Hemingway they've constructed, they very much love. And I admit, the Hemingway they've constructed sounds like a really interesting author. But the Hemingway that's on the page, I'm pretty sure I know that Hemingway. You don't ever want to say it for sure, but I'm pretty sure that I do. Whereas systematic revisitation of Fitzgerald, not a bad idea at all. That might happen. Anyway, next is H is for hardback. Do you prefer paperbacks or hardcovers? And for decades, I preferred paperbacks, almost to the total exclusion of hardcovers, especially mass market paperbacks, the smaller ones, which I viewed at the time and still view as an almost perfect piece of human technology, a fantastic human invention. Total ease of use, and the only real drawback being durability. Most mass market paperbacks are not particularly durable. I say that, although a lot of mass market paperbacks that I have, I've been reading for 50 years. And they're not anything that could be handed on to another generation, but they'll last me a few more reads. Not all of them are like that, and you have to be fairly careful, which I'm not. But one of the drawbacks of mass market paperbacks is that they can get more difficult to use over time. Not only because you have to be increasingly delicate with them, and I'm bad at that, but also because your eyesight worsens over time, typically. And the print size in trade paperbacks and hardcovers is much easier. So I tend to prefer hardcovers now, trade paperbacks or hardcovers, not only for that, but also because they're more durable. I'm a little bit hard on my stuff. And those hardcovers especially are more durable. I not only handle them a little bit roughly, but I also archive things in them, which pushes open their binding just a bit. So they have to be fairly durable to take that kind of thing. And mass market paperbacks obviously are not. Of course, this is to say nothing of ebooks here on the iPad. Ebooks are, you load 1,000 ebooks onto a device like this, and then you cover the device like this in tough plastic and rubber on all the corners so that you can't hurt the device. And suddenly you have the best of all possible worlds, because there's no problem with print size. There's no problem with storage. There's no problem with durability. There's no problem with archiving. There's no problem with anything like that. Ebooks beat both formats easily, but if we're just talking about hardcovers and paperbacks, I'm going to go for, appropriate enough, the H option of hardback. Then the next question is, H is for Hardy. Which is your favorite Thomas Hardy novel? I am not the super Hardy fan that I know exists all over BookTube. And that sometimes makes me feel guilty because I recognize his talent. He's not an author where I'm saying, like Stephen King, where I'm saying I recognize his popularity, but it's based on nothing that is actually on the page. The page is a mess. Hardy is not like that. I think that his plots are messes, but his prose is amazing. But since I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Hardy fanatic, I won't claim anything special or recondite or off the beaten path or anything like that. For this answer, I'll just say Return to the Native. I just think it's beautifully done from beginning to end. Although the plot, there are elements of the plot that I scratch my head about them. Then the next question is, H is for hot. If you are in the Northern Hemisphere, how are you coping with the heat? This is true. In June in Boston, we had 2 heat waves, one small and one large. And that was in June. So that's to say nothing of late July or the dog days of August when typically the heat is much worse. Who knows what, like for instance, Boston will have to deal with during that time. And I have a few ways to beat the heat. I have a little AC unit that was beautifully installed. Sometimes the installation, if I have to do it myself, the installation is a mess. This was beautifully installed. It's rock solid. It's actually bolted into the frame of the window. It has professional sealing on every single possible seam. It's just an amazing thing. The job, I'm really pleased with the job that was done. But I don't like using it. I don't like using the unit. I hate the way it makes the air feel. It's cool, yes, and it dries out the air, yes, but it doesn't feel natural at all. It feels very antagonistic. And it makes things too cold for me. I am always cold. I'm always hungry. And the music is always too loud. So my preferred way for beating the heat, and it worked throughout that whole heat wave, I only used the AC unit for little bits and pieces at a time and only to cool off my dog. I was covered in curly fur. Although I also used a couple of methods there. I gave her a trim of her fur and I also gave her a bath. And we're going to do that again tomorrow, too. Another trim and another bath, just to keep her in summer trim. But for the most part, I beat those two heat waves with a few practical efforts. Just a few practical precautions. First of all, no exertions, no physical exertions. Don't exert yourself. Don't do that. And then I would just a barrage of things. I would keep a floor fan going, a little box floor fan, just to keep the air circulating. I would keep the windows open at night and then make sure to close them once the sun crests the ridge behind the house. Once the air is hotter outside than inside, the windows should be closed. Obviously. Although it seems a little bit counterintuitive on a couple of levels, which is why a lot of people don't do it. They just throw the windows open on the hottest day of the year. That is bad. Yes, it's true if the windows are closed, the air will start to get a little stale inside, but the temperature will be far lower because you've got air circulating better on the inside than on the outside. So that's another thing. And then I have two practical things that I've shown you before. One is this big water bottle that I refill several times a day. The key is to just periodically take healthy sized swigs from this bottle. Don't wait until you're thirsty. As the YouTube health channels will tell you, if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. Don't get to that point. Your pee should be yellow, slightly yellow tinged clear. It should not be bright yellow. It should not be bright yellow. It should be it should be clear like water with a slight yellow tinge. That proves that you are well hydrated. So I use that. I also use this, a little terracloth towel that I run under cold water and use to just tamp down the head. Your head is generating a huge amount of heat. So you want to do that because that adds a little layer of moisture to your skin that is then evaporated by the floor fan, and that is a cooling effect. You also want to take this thing and press it to the base of your head, right above the muscles of your neck and right below the knob at your medulla oblongata, right at the base of your head. That has a remarkable and widespread cooling effect throughout the body because of what's going on in that area, circulation-wise and nervous system-wise. You can put a cold compress or a cold cloth anywhere, but if you put it right there at the base of your skull, it's an amazing feeling of cooling pretty much the whole body. You just do that regularly. I just do that regularly. I am taking somewhat of these precautions today. Boston is predicted to be fairly hot and humid today and tomorrow, but it isn't necessary because this is not anything like what happened last week, and it's not anything like what's coming. I am cognizant of that fact. We had a little heat wave in Boston last week, but it was not a heat dome, and it was nothing compared to what it can be. Triple-digit temperatures for 5 days in a row, that could easily happen in Boston this year. That could easily happen in July or in August. And that will be much, much worse. So you'll be hearing about it if it happens. But as to coping with the heat, those are the ways that I do it. I drastically shorten the walks that I take with Frida. I drastically shorten or eliminate my outside errands to run. I keep a fan blowing air, circulating air. I make sure that the windows are closed during the heat of the day. And I make sure that I have access to cold liquid. A nice, that water bottle is a bit of a thermos, so you put nice cold water in there, it stays cold all day. And a cold compress, a cold wet face cloth to go on the base of the skull and also to rub the skin of the head. Those little precautions work wonders for me, absolutely work wonders. I don't need anything more than that, at least I haven't so far. I didn't need it the worst of the summer last year or the year before that. So anyway, the next H prompt is H is for Hunger Games. Do you prefer the Hunger Games or Harry Potter? I much prefer the Hunger Games to Harry Potter. Harry Potter has even the first book. Always the main thing that's always bothered me about it is that the author is just clearly making one thing up after another. And I know you're going to say, well, it's a fantasy series, so of course she is. But I mean making one thing up after another without any planning and just leaving it that way. It's clear to me that Rowling was mostly doing that in the first 3 Harry Potter books, just making stuff up as she goes along. It's clear to me that in the first Harry Potter book, she has no idea who Lord Voldemort is, She has no idea what his history is with Harry Potter. She has no idea about the magic systems of her world, even at the end of the last book, much less in the first book. And it showed. I don't need the author to show all their cards at once. I don't need there to be huge exposition dumps of world building. But it shows. If you read enough fantasy, you can tell. And I think, my opinion is that in the years since the worldwide success of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling has gotten very comfortable simply telling bland, bald-faced lies about how pre-ordered all of her thoughts were on the subject. I think the final answer to that question is in the book. It's just there on the page. But one way or another, The Hunger Games didn't strike me that way, and also had the benefit of a lot more going on. It's a lot less twee than Harry Potter. There's a lot more stakes involved. I'm a big fan of Battle Royale anyway, the book that Hunger Games rips off. So reading someone else's ripoff of it was also fun. Although even there, I could say that I thought I detect a strong ad hoc element to the world building. The world building in both Harry Potter and Hunger Games doesn't make much sense. It doesn't. It maybe is a bit internally consistent for the story that you're reading, but it doesn't make any sense that it would ever have become that way to start with. And I think that's even more pronounced in the Hunger Games than it is in Harry Potter. Although a separate extra-dimensional household where all-powerful gods are trained should have changed the Muggles world long before Harry Potter came along. If Hogwarts has been around as long as J.K. Rowling says, that the world building in both cases, whether it's Hogwarts or Panem, neither one struck me as having been well thought out. Because one of the keys to good world building is not just how do things work now, but how do they get this way. And in both books, in both series, I don't think the how did things get this way question survives even a few seconds. But I like the Hunger Games more. I think it's more entertaining. Then H is for honey. Pooh was addicted to honey. Here, Jim means Winnie the Pooh. Was addicted to honey. What is your sweet addiction? This is well known on this channel. Mega Stuff Oreos. They are the ordinary Oreos that have the sawdust, round, black sandwich parts, the bread part, and then the middle is industrial petroleum vanilla flavored something or other. Their entire the company that makes Oreos has taken lately to proudly proclaiming that they are entirely vegan. That is true because they're non-organic. But one way or another, you take an Oreo cookie and double the amount of stuffing, and that is a mega stuff Oreo. Oh no, that's a double stuff Oreo. And then you add another layer of the stuffing, and you get a mega stuff Oreo. And then there's something called a most stuff, which I have never seen in the wild. I've had the Richardsons up in Vermont have provided me with the only most stuff I've ever eaten. But other than that, I've never seen them for sale. I hardly ever see mega stuff Oreos for sale in the places that I usually go to. And I'm running low on mega stuff donations from the likes of you. Just saying. That's all. But they are my sweet tooth addiction, absolutely. Then H is for the Handmaid's Tale. If you've read the book, what do you think of it? I have read the book. I didn't think much of it. I don't have much patience with science fiction carpetbaggers. These are writers who write so-called literary fiction who decide, hey, I'm going to write something where I just say that reality is different from what it is. And so I guess that makes me a science fiction writer. And if the little science fiction people want to give me an honor, what is it they call it? A Hugo Award? Okay, I'll take it. But I sneer at them, of course, in private and pretty much in public, too. If you tell me that I'm a science fiction author, I'm going to be deeply offended. But I will carpetbag on their territory in order to scoop up a few thousand extra readers. And because there's a plot that I want to tell, and the easiest, laziest way for me to tell it is to simply make the world different from what it is. Isn't that what those little science fiction people do? Don't they make the world different from what it is? No, they don't. They build a different world. Completely, from the ground up, from the beginning of time up. They build a different world. Something that Margaret Atwood or Cormac McCarthy or any of these other science fiction carpetbaggers couldn't do if their life depended on it. So when I see a literary convention that, or a literary dissertation of some kind or other, that draws any kind of equivalence between, for instance, Margaret Atwood and Ursula Le Guin, I just wince, because the two aren't alike at all. Margaret Atwood says to herself, I'm imagining a scenario. I want to tell a story about that scenario. I don't want to work up. I don't want to go to the bother of working up a contemporary setting for that scenario. Instead, I'll just make up a world. And as a result, the world building in Handmaid's Tale is terrible. And now there are a lot of people who would hear that. Fortunately, none of them will watch this channel, but there are a lot of people who would hear that and say, look at this cishet white dude saying that he faults the world building in Handmaid's Tale, as if that was anywhere near the most important thing in the book. Typical. Well, the circumstances that are happening in Handmaid's Tale don't exist in the real world, which means the author made them up. If the author does a crappy job of making them up, that's a perfectly valid critical response to the book. Whether you think you are being marched into a birthing chamber or not, that is still a perfectly valid criticism of a book. Is it internally consistent? And Handmaid's Tale is not, obviously. It's terrible science fiction. So I'm not a big fan of the book, no. Then H is... Boy, this H tag brought out the peppy. Brought out the salt and pepper in me, didn't it? Well, we're in the last one here. The H is for Hopper. What are your thoughts on the works of Edward Hopper, the American painter? I typically like Edward Hopper, but with a leery kind of arm's length distrust because of one painting, because of Nighthawks. You might not know the title, but you definitely know the painting. You might not also know the painter, but you definitely know the painting. A lit, thin diner at night in a big city, man in a hat, woman at the counter. Meant usually characterized as showing the hopeless isolation of city life. There's no conviviality in it. It's been pastiched and parodied many, many times. And the reason why that painting alone causes me to hold this painter at arm's length is because Nighthawks is one of the rare instances of a dude bro painting. Not a dude bro novel, but a dude bro painting. There isn't a single dude bro aficionado anywhere in the world who doesn't love that painting, and they don't love it for art. Any more than they love their crappy dude bro novels for art. They don't love it for art. They love it because they want to be the guy in the hat at the counter. And Edward Hopper's he did a lot of other work. A lot of work that was very different from Nighthawks. A lot of work that was very similar but much better. And I acknowledge all that, but I don't want to be seen as crossing sides. I don't want to be encouraging dude bro readers who think maybe they'll work their way into art via dude bro by looking at that one painting over and over again. You're not that guy in the hat. You've never been to that diner except ironically. Those diners don't exist anymore except ironically, is what I would say to those people if any of them are watching this channel. But of course they're not. So I generally like Edward Hopper, but how am I supposed to generally like him when he has an dude bro painting to his credit on a wall in probably Chicago? It's probably in Chicago, right? The ultimate dude bro city. It's probably there. One way or another, it makes me a little leery. I want to tell all the dude bros that love Nighthawks and don't know anything about Edward Hopper, don't know anything else about artwork at all. They just know that painting because, yeah, man. And if I were to tell those dude bros, in the painting, the man in the hat is talking to the woman, they'd say, oh, no, hey, leave your politics out of this, okay? Yeah, man, that painting, yeah, I've been there. We've all been there. No, I haven't. Neither of you. No, I haven't. And neither are you. You're a paper delicate snowflake. You haven't been there or anywhere else. And I don't know where this longing comes from, but one way or another, to those dude bro aficionados, I would say, instead of making a pilgrimage to wherever this painting is hanging in order to say, yeah, man, maybe you ought to turn left on the next hallway and take in a few Norman Rockwells. Okay? Take in a few Norman Rockwells. Anyway, all right, so this is a very contentious alphabet tag. They won't all be. I'll make sure that the next one is warm and cuddly. But anyway, that's my G tag. Well, that's my G tag. I'm not, obviously, as you can tell, I'm not feeling very well, and that may have informed some of my peppery responses. But it's all over now. We got through it. All I have to do is tag people. I want to tag the Book Eclectic. I don't think I've ever tagged her before. I'll tag Michael K. Vaughan in case he feels like doing an alphabet tag. I'll tag David Wiley, one of my co-hosts for Summer of the Silmarils. I'll tag Book Time with Elvis. Yeah, I think he's doing some of these alphabet tags. Love to see more. AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. Haven't tagged AJ in a while. Also, a brand new BookTube channel, new to me anyway, Ashley Kareen. Very funny, very, very watchable channel, so I'll leave a link down below. And of course, Britta, over there in on the continent. Feel free to do this tag. And I will wrap this up. I have exhausted myself by tilting at windmills. So I will wrap this up, and I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.